London, 1748. The city breathes like a wounded beast, smoke curling from chimneys, rainwater bleeding into crooked stones, the air thick with rot and coal. Lanterns tremble against the fog, their light barely keeping back the shadows, where beggars, thieves, and something far more dangerous wait. And at the center of it all walks a woman whose story history tried to erase. But tonight, you'll hear it. This is not a story of comfort. It is a tale of betrayal, cruelty, and survival in a city that devoured its poor. To be blunt, you probably won't survive this one. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is right now. I love seeing this community light up across the map. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The year is 1748. The city of London exhales smoke and damp, its veins choked with the stench of coal fires, slaughterhouses, and overflowing gutters. Rainwater mixes with mud on crooked cobblestones, the kind that swallow heels and break bones. Shadows curl inside narrow alleyways, where the cries of hawkers and the shrill laughter of drunkards collide with the groans of the hungry. Beneath the flicker of oil lamps, a woman walks, skirts hitched just enough to avoid the sludge. Her name will not be remembered in history books, yet her footsteps press into a world where survival is sold by the hour. She is one of thousands. In Georgian London, prostitution is no hidden vice. It is a public theater, as common as gin shops and public hanging. Writers of the age estimated there were nearly 50 women plying this trade across the city, from Covent Garden's painted courtesans to the ragged girls who haunt the darker corners of Southwark. The streets call them nymphs of the pave. Magistrates call them criminals. Customers call them whatever their fantasy requires. In the press, pamphlets circulate lurid tales of bawdy houses, moral collapse, and women fallen from virtue. But the truth is more brutal than the gossip. For most, the profession is not about pleasure but necessity. A single loaf of bread costs more than a day's honest labor. An illegitimate child is a death sentence for mother and infant alike. And so, women learn to wield their beauty, or what remains of it, as a weapon. Our story follows one such woman, her real name obscured by time, replaced here with the whispers history left behind. She was born in London's East End, the daughter of a failed cooper, who drank his profits before his barrels left the workshop. When her mother succumbed to fever, the girl was 12, barefoot and half-starved. By 14, she found herself apprenticed not to a seamstress or a laundress, but to the mistress of a brothel. The city offered no gentler path. Inside these houses, the air smelled of spilled porter, unwashed linen, and cheap perfume. Walls were stained with soot from smoking candles. Men of every rank arrived: merchants, lawyers, even minor nobles slipping through doors under the cover of dusk. A girl quickly learned to smile, to feign affection, and to keep secrets. Secrets were the true coin of the trade. And in London, secrets were everywhere. The city was alive with rumor. Jacobite plots whispered in taverns, smugglers' routes stretching from Kent to the Thames, officials pocketing bribes, clergy breaking their own sermons. A prostitute's bed could be the confessional of empire. By 17, she was already spoken of among regulars as more than a beauty. She listened, remembered, and stitched fragments of conversation into patterns. She knew which merchant ships sailed under false flags, which alderman kept mistresses in Westminster, which officer betrayed loyalties with loose tongues after too much wine. Knowledge became her hidden dowry. Yet, the streets were merciless. Gin was cheaper than clean water, and mothers fed it to their children to quiet hunger. Debtors' prisons overflowed, and each week the hangman's cart rattled toward Tyburn, carrying thieves and murderers alike to the gallows. Crowds cheered their suffering like spectators at a play. In this theater of cruelty, the prostitute's life was precarious, teetering between fleeting luxury and sudden ruin. Disease lurked in every fevered client, violence in every shadow. Still, she learned to survive. She adorned herself with silk stolen from a careless noble, her hair powdered to disguise the lice that infested her lodgings. On her better nights, she earned enough to dine on roasted fowl instead of crusts. On her worse, she hid bruises beneath rouge. And then came the moment that shifted her path forever. One evening, a man in a dark coat lingered outside her usual tavern near Covent Garden. Unlike the others, he did not leer or call. He watched. When she approached, he spoke in measured tones, not of pleasure, but of service. The crown, he suggested, had need of women like her. Women who could slip unseen through doors barred to others. Women who could coax confessions with a whisper and a smile. Was it a trap? Or a chance to climb above the filth? No record survives of her answer that night. But the truth reveals itself in what followed. She began moving among a different class of men: naval officers, government clerks, foreign envoys carrying laughter on her lips and questions in her eyes. She had become something far more dangerous than a prostitute. She had become a spy. The city around her did not change. Lanterns still smoked against the fog. Pickpockets still darted through markets. The cries of debtors still echoed through Newgate Prison. But within this world of shadow and survival, her story took on a sharper edge. She was no longer simply one of the countless women traded for coin. She was a blade hidden in silk, a witness to secrets that could unmake kingdoms. Her footsteps echoed down the wet streets, swallowed by the roar of London's night. Few notice her passing. Fewer still will ever know the price she will pay for the path she has chosen. The year tilts into 1750, and London pulses with both grandeur and rot. Carriages rattle past St. Paul's Cathedral, while beggars stretch their skeletal hands at passers-by. Music spills from coffeehouses, clashing with the shriek of fishmongers and the groans of the sick. And beneath this endless tide of humanity, a hidden war simmers, one of whispers, codes, and clandestine meetings. She moves within it like a shadow painted in rouge. Her silk gown is second-hand, its hem frayed from too many nights dragging through rain-slicked cobblestones. Yet when she enters a tavern, men notice not the wear of her dress, but the weight of her gaze. Steady, inviting, disarming. They think she is theirs to command. They never guess she belongs to another master entirely. Her handler, known only in fragments of record, was a man of middling rank in His Majesty's Secret Service. Espionage in mid-18th century Britain was no polished profession. It was a patchwork of informants, smugglers, and opportunists, feeding scraps of intelligence about Jacobite sympathizers, French agents, or seditious pamphleteers. Women were rarely official operatives, but prostitutes? They had access where soldiers could not tread. Her assignment was simple yet perilous: to charm, to listen, and to remember. At private suppers with naval lieutenants, she traced idle circles on their wrists while they boasted of ship deployments in the Channel. At smoky card tables, she feigned drunken laughter as merchants bragged of smuggling routes into France. In the rented rooms above taverns, she endured their grasping hands while fixing in her mind the names that slipped from their lips. Every secret she gathered was delivered not in writing too dangerous, but in whispered reports, passed in alleyways or confessions disguised as pillow talk. Sometimes a coin pressed into her palm rewarded her. Sometimes nothing but a nod, yet the stakes grew with each revelation. The danger was not only foreign spies. London streets crawled with informers and constables eager to fill Newgate cells. Brothels were raided without warning, women hauled before magistrates to be whipped, fined, or branded with hot irons. For her, the added peril was discovery by the very men she deceived. If one realized her laughter was calculated, her caress a trap, she would not see another sunrise. Still, she proved deft. One tale that lingers, half rumor, half record, describes her meeting with a visiting French envoy, disguised as a wealthy gambler. He sought to recruit smugglers along the Thames, using London's underworld to funnel supplies to France in anticipation of war. She became his companion for 3 nights. By the 4th, his name and mission were in British hands. Days later, he vanished from the city, his fate unrecorded. But triumph was always shadowed by fear. To play the courtesan was to live in constant duality, smiling when revulsion churned, flattering when rage burned. Each night demanded a performance, each word could be fatal. And all the while, the city's cruelty pressed closer. Gin shops stayed crowded with mothers cradling infants drunk into silence. Prison hulks floated on the Thames, their decks crowded with convicts awaiting transport to colonies. Every corner reminded her of the abyss she skirted, and yet she endured. Perhaps ambition drove her, or desperation, or a flicker of belief that service to the crown might one day buy her freedom. Perhaps she dreamed of leaving behind the rank rooms of London's bawdy houses for a quieter life. Or perhaps she was already resigned to the knowledge that such women rarely lived long enough to grow old. There were nights when she returned to her narrow lodging in the Rookery near St. Giles, her gown reeking of sweat and spilled ale, her hair tangled, her stomach hollow. She would sit in silence, staring at the guttering flame of a candle, her ears still echoing with men's drunken confessions. She carried them like stones in her chest, heavy and suffocating. Then, without warning, her work deepened. She was asked to observe not only smugglers and gamblers, but those with influence, members of parliament rumored to consort with Jacobite, sympathizers, officers suspected of selling naval secrets. Such men were dangerous not because they were careless, but because they were powerful. One wrong word in their company could see her arrested, or worse, silenced before she could be brought to trial. And yet she played the part flawlessly. She adjusted her manner for each man. The bashful maid, the witty companion, the submissive lover, each mask carefully chosen, each detail rehearsed. She memorized details others overlooked, the initials engraved on a signet ring, the inflection of an accent, the direction a man glanced when a certain name was mentioned. But masks cannot be worn forever. There are fragments of testimony, buried in legal records, that suggest she grew reckless. Some claim she began to speak too boldly, that she whispered her knowledge to the wrong ears, perhaps hoping to elevate her standing. Others insist she was betrayed by the very service that had used her, discarded once her usefulness waned. The truth is blurred, swallowed by time. What is certain is this: in the year 1751, her name obscured, altered, perhaps even replaced, surfaced in the hidden channels of London's legal machinery. Not in the public courts, where trials were spectacles for crowds, but in secret hearings, where judgments were rendered without the light of day. She had crossed an invisible line. The silk she once wore became a shroud of danger. The life she carved from shadows was about to turn against her. The city does not announce her fall with trumpets. There is no crowd at Tyburn, no printed pamphlet mocking her sins. Instead, it begins quietly in absence, a silence where once there was noise. The men who sought her company no longer call. The tavern keeper looks away when she enters, muttering excuses about full rooms. Even her handler, that faceless link to the crown, fails to appear in their usual alleyway. Whispers rise like smoke. She has been betrayed. Betrayal in 18th century espionage was a common currency. Informants sold names for coin. Rivals fed lies to eliminate competition. And the crown itself was ruthless in discarding pawns whose usefulness waned. Whether through carelessness or conspiracy, Her cover is gone. She is no longer the silken shadow but a liability. One night, constables seize her outside a gin shop in Holborn. She fights, not with blows but with words, insisting she serves the crown, that her secrets are not hers to tell. But the men who bind her wrists do not answer. They march her not toward Newgate, where public prisoners rot, but to a lesser-known chamber near Westminster, a place few Londoners ever see. Here the walls are stone, the torches burn low, and the echo of her footsteps carries into silence. This is not a public court, with jeering spectators and criers announcing charges. This is the realm of secret sittings, used for cases deemed too delicate, too political, or too scandalous for daylight. Records are scarce, many deliberately destroyed. Yet fragments suggest such hearings existed, buried beneath the machinery of justice. She is questioned by men whose faces blur in the dim light. They ask about names, meetings, whispers she has heard in taverns. They ask whether she served France, whether she carried coded messages, whether she is truly loyal to the crown she claims. Every answer she gives only binds her tighter in their net. For a prostitute to claim she served the government is laughable to them. For a woman to suggest she shaped the fate of naval routes or parliamentary debates, unthinkable. She is not seen as an asset, but as a scandal to be smothered before it spreads. And yet among the questions lies a deeper cruelty. The men probe not only her secrets but her body, demanding details of her trade, her clients, her habits. Each question is a blade, stripping her of dignity, reducing her from spy to spectacle. She stands in silk, but it feels like chains. The punishment is not declared in the open. No sentencing is read before a crowd. Instead, she is confined in silence, her existence erased from the city that once whispered her name. Perhaps she was held in one of London's smaller jails, where prisoners slept on straw soaked with sewage. Perhaps she was sent to a workhouse, laboring until her body broke. Or perhaps, as some suggest, she was quietly deported to the colonies, her past buried an ocean away. History leaves only fragments. A magistrate's note of a fallen woman entangled in treason. A diary entry from a jailer, describing a whore who boasted of spying for kings. And then, nothing. She vanishes from the record, as if swallowed whole by the city itself. But silence is also a story. The absence of her name in the official rolls, the destruction of her trial's record, the way her memory survives only in rumor, these speak louder than any verdict. She was judged not only for what she did, but for who she was. A woman without rank, without husband, without the protection of wealth. The betrayal cuts deeper when one considers the men she once served. Their secrets are protected, their reputations intact. She alone bears the weight of scandal, cast aside like refuse. It is a pattern repeated across centuries. Women whose lives intersect with power, yet whose stories end in erasure. Still, one mystery lingers. A single pamphlet, circulated anonymously in 1752, makes vague mention of a painted dove of London who gathered whispers for the crown, only to be consumed by it. Was this her, thinly veiled? Or another like her, one of many lost in the shadows? Scholars debate whether this was proof of her existence or simply another tale spun for gossip-hungry readers. What is certain is that she paid the ultimate price for stepping beyond her station. In a city where courtesans were tolerated as long as they remained silent, she dared to wield knowledge. And knowledge, in the world of kings and parliaments, was more dangerous than daggers. The walls of her secret court still stand, though the stones do not whisper her name. Yet the silence is louder than any verdict, echoing the fate of countless women erased by the machinery of empire. Her story, unfinished and obscured, drifts into the darkness. London carries on as though she never lived. The markets swell with the cries of vendors selling eels and onions. The gin shops overflow with hollow-eyed mothers, and the carriages of noblemen rattle across Westminster Bridge. The city's heart beats on, deaf to the silence of one woman's disappearance. Her story does not end in spectacle. There is no scaffold at Tyburn, no execution notice in the broadsheets. Instead, she dissolves quietly into history, as so many women did, consumed by the shadows of empire. To the crown, she is a liability erased. To the men who whispered secrets in her arms, she is a danger best forgotten. To the city, she is nothing more than one more nameless figure swallowed by its labyrinth. And yet, traces remain. A ledger from a workhouse in Clerkenwell notes the arrival of a woman of unseemly repute in 1752, whose name has been smeared with ink. A naval officer's diary mentions the sudden arrest of a silken temptress who vanished before trial. An unsigned letter preserved in a private collection describes a painted lady who gathered whispers for His Majesty, betrayed by her own masters. Each fragment is incomplete, each detail debated, but together they form a silhouette, fragile, haunting, impossible to ignore. What lingers strongest is not her end, but the life she led in defiance of her circumstances. Born into poverty, forced into survival, she transformed her body into currency and her wit into weaponry. She learned to slip through the cracks of power, listening, memorizing, shaping the currents of information that decided wars and toppled men. She walked through a world that valued her only for pleasure, and she twisted it into something sharper. But history has no mercy for women like her. To write openly of her would have meant scandal, shame, and political fallout. And so her name was struck from the record, her deeds scattered like ash in the wind. She became a ghost story, one of many courtesans whispered about in darkened taverns, their faces blurred by time, their truths buried in silence. Yet her presence lingers in the very fabric of the city. In the crooked alleys of Covent Garden, where lanterns flicker against rain-slicked stone, one can almost hear her footsteps. In the shadows of Westminster, where secret courts once silenced the inconvenient, her unanswered questions still hang in the air. Was she a traitor or a patriot discarded? Did she die in confinement or escape under another name? The truth remains just out of reach, tantalizing, incomplete. And perhaps that is the cruelest fate of all, not execution, not exile, but erasure. To live, to struggle, to shape the hidden currents of history, only to be swallowed whole by silence. Still, her story is not entirely gone. It flickers here, in the retelling, in the act of remembering. She is no longer just a forgotten prostitute. Discarded in the shadows of London, she is a witness to the hidden wars, fought not with armies, but with whispers. She is a reminder of the countless women who lived, suffered, and vanished. Their names erased, their echoes faint, but enduring. The rain falls on London, as it always has. It washes the cobblestones where she once walked, blurs the glow of oil lamps, and muffles the footsteps of those who follow. And in the hush between raindrops, one might almost hear her voice, a whisper from the dark, demanding not forgiveness, but remembrance. The tale of the prostitute turned spy is not a comfortable one. It is jagged, incomplete, stitched from fragments and shadows, but it is precisely in that silence where the weight of her story lies. She lived in a city that punished women for surviving, that consumed them as spectacle or discarded them as refuse. And yet, for a brief and perilous moment, she stepped beyond the role assigned to her. She became a vessel of secrets, a silken blade, a woman who glimpsed the machinery of empire from within its darkest corners. Her erasure was deliberate. The courts chose silence. The men she served chose forgetfulness. History chose indifference. And so, she lingers not as a name in a book, but as an echo in the cobblestones, a ghost in the London fog. To tell her story now is to defy that erasure. It is to breathe life into the shadows, to remind us that behind the grandeur of history are the forgotten, the silenced, the betrayed. And though her name may never be known, her presence endures haunting, fragile, and unforgettable.